Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am joined by guest Jason Resnick. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Excited to be here and geek out about email.
Yes, we're going to go deep geek on email automation. So you are forewarned, dear listener. You might recognize Jason's name from being on Business of Authority. I also actually recently interviewed him for a new podcast called Doing Daily, which is the kind of the genesis of this conversation where it was sort of meant to be a high level conversation. We completely went off book and got into some fun stuff. And then after the show had probably another 45-minute conversation about really nerdy email automation stuff. So I was like, man, we should you were like, it's too bad we didn't record that. So let's set up another call. So here we are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So for folks who maybe didn't hear any of those other episodes, could you just give a brief who you are and what you do to set the context?
Sure. So my name is Jason Resnick. I'm the founder of NurtureKit, nurturekit.co. And I am, in your words, which I use lovingly throughout all of my intros, is a recovering web developer turned email marketing and automation expert.
Cool. Maybe start with what has been your emailing journey to date? What do you use? How often do you send it? What do you send it about? Who's the target market? That's sort of just high level stuff. And then we can get into like how you've evolved over time into the setup that you're moving toward.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't regret much, if anything, but one of the things that I do regret in business is not starting email sooner. And when I did dive into it, it was mainly out of seeing how clients use it. As I said, I was a web developer and I mostly worked with e-commerce sites, not necessarily D2C stuff, but people that were taking transactions online, whether it was a membership site, whether it was digital product, whether it was a physical product. And I saw how email impacted their bottom line. And so I was like, okay, I see something here and I got to get into this. And so what I wound up doing was I started my own personal brand, helping other freelancers really just try to figure out how to build predictable income. And that was out of the genesis of too many people asking me the same questions over and over again. So I was like, all right, I'm going to create this personal brand around this. And so I just started emailing pretty irregularly. And then I kind of ramped it up to once a week. And then I just started mixing in certain things, like just testing things. I mean, I'm a developer, and so I was just trying to see what works, what doesn't work. How do I get a click? How do I get an open? How do I make sales? And as just me personally, I'm always been fascinated by human behavior. And I minored in psychology in college. And it led me down the rabbit hole of which I am today. And a lot of what I do is based on human behavior. It's email that is smart. We're not using email as a blunt tool to kind of bludgeon people into buying things or unsubscribe. People get value while being on the list. And they themselves signal through clicks, through other things, but through clicks mainly, that they are ready to buy something. And then they get pulled into various different automations to, help them to that buying decision. And now to this day, currently, I send emails daily, 6 times a week, really, to 2 separate individual lists, one to course creators and marketers, and the others is to that freelancer list.
Cool. Okay. So it's always been my experience that people can go really nuts with I'm mostly familiar with Drip, but I understand that this is possible in ConvertKit as well, and others, where you can go nuts with segmentation and different campaigns and branching logic. And when I first started with it, I, also being a recovering web developer, went way overboard with that stuff. Because it's kind of easy to set up, but then it was very unruly, and it was hard to tell what kind of experience any given individual was having. Like, are they getting a daily email and they're on 3 like side things, and then I was like, okay, so now if somebody signs up for this, I need to unsubscribe them from this, and then resubscribe them, but only resubscribe them if they were subscribed before. And it was like, oh
Yeah.
man.
Hmm.
So, and whenever I read your daily list, and it always strikes me that you like to keep things, you like to automate things, but also keep them simple. Is that
Absolutely.
yeah?
Yeah.
So talk about that. Like, how did you? What was an early win for you in terms of like a simple automation that produced some results?
Landing page abandonments. Just having somebody click a sales page, not convert, not buy, and then follow up. Like most people experience this with cart abandonments, but in the space that I'm in with digital products or memberships, there's no cart per se, right? There's just this intent. Hey, there was this interest in the email that got somebody to click over into the sales page, but they didn't buy, right? And that was like my first, like, oh, okay, that's pretty simple. And much like cart abandonment, the landing page abandonment, the psychology of it is the same from both the business side of things, but also the subscriber side of things, and got similar results, right? So anywhere between 20 and 30% people converted off of those. So for me, it was like, okay, this is interesting. And much like you, I was tracking everything, right? Like it's funny because I run into people either track nothing or they track everything.
Yeah.
It's like very few in the middle ground.
Right.
And then you don't get your answers you want if you're at those two ends of the spectrum. And so I did something very similar. I used Drip for a long time. I use ConvertKit now, but same applies in Infusionsoft and all of these other ActiveCampaign and all these other ESPs. But just being able to understand who the subscriber is and put them in like a central backbone, whether that is a daily or weekly newsletter or something like that, and then allowing the intent of that subscriber to kind of pull them into other things and then loop them back in, right? So just really, I can't emphasize it enough. And I was actually talking with Jane Portman, and she had me on her podcast, and we were talking about segmentation and that kind of thing. And we went down a rabbit hole, and much like what I've discovered, and probably similar to you, Jane was like, "Look, segmentation makes everything else easier," and I found the same way. Right? Once I understood who the subscriber is, defining those automations and the paths at which somebody travels down becomes so much clearer, right? And you don't have 87 different automations running, wondering if somebody's getting 7 emails on any given day, right? Because it's just like, okay, that's...
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, and it was me as well. But once I sat down and thought about the subscriber themselves, where they are, who they are, what's their motivation, what their needs are. Once I understood that, then it was like, oh, I could write emails about this that lead directly to this product, right? And it makes the path super clear. And it makes everything that much simpler too, because then you don't have to think about all these random pathways and how to get people back onto the main road and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I feel seen. I did exactly. I went from like over architecting it to throwing up my hands and tracking nothing. I do no segmentation, nothing. I know very little. I mean, anecdotally, I know who's on my list, but I don't have like, I can't look and say like, okay, get me all the web developers on the list and I'm going to send them a special email. I don't use any liquid tags whatsoever. Yeah, so it's like to me, it's the blunt instrument. They're either on the list or they're not on the list, and so there's probably tons of room for optimization. I am gun shy about getting back to that. Like, wait, I don't even know how this Rube Goldberg machine works. Is it even working? I've never been a big fan. Well, we don't need to go down there. I've tracked stuff and then never looked at it. So I'm like, why am I tracking this?
Right.
If I'm not going to use it, I'm going to stop tracking it. So that's kind of where the pendulum swung all the way to the other end. But I take your point where you can help the automation or the personalization, and it not just like hi first name, but like real personalization can help the reader. And as long as it doesn't, the tough bar to clear for me is like, it can't, I want it to be set it and forget it, right? So like it needs to be simple because otherwise it's going to break.
Right.
Or there's going to be some edge case or something weird. So let's go back into that first big win and get really technical about it. Landing page abandonment. So you send an email, it's got a link in it. Are you tracking the click on the link, or are you tracking on your website who, like, how do you even know that somebody was on the landing page and then didn't buy? What are the moving parts there that don't require you to like pour over a spreadsheet?
Right. So when I first set it up, I was tracking both the click in the email as well as using JavaScript to actually on the page to send that back into Drip. Mm-hmm. Then in Drip, monitor, because I already had the automation connected with the shopping cart, I knew if somebody made a purchase. So really it was just, hey, if these two things match, the JavaScript API callback as well as that click, and they spend a certain amount of time on the page, but don't buy within a certain period of time, send the email, which was over-engineered. Right? Like there's no reason for the JavaScript API callback, and I took away some of the criteria. Like I think I was like, if somebody's on the page for a minute, like 90 seconds or something, like I'm a developer, so I over-engineer everything, right? And so I was like, that's unimportant, right? If they clicked enough from the email, because that's really all email is designed to do. I can't take a credit card through email. So I have to, email is designed to get the click over. Mm-hmm. So if the click happened, that was enough of an intent on my end. And now I don't even use landing page abandonment anymore. It's kind of matured a little bit more, where I'm still tracking clicks over to sales pages, but I'm tracking the number of clicks over a certain given a time, right? Because sometimes if somebody just comes onto the list, they see the link, they're interested enough to click, but they're not ready to buy.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, let me see what
looking
this
at
is.
it, right?
Yeah.
But if they click at a second time in a short period of time, let's say a couple of days if you're doing daily, then there's the intent. They know what they're going over to, right? And they're going to, maybe I need to read this a little bit more. Maybe I didn't have time on the first time. I now at least know what the price is, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Then if they click on a third time, you know the intent is there. Your sales page is not doing its job in converting that person. But tracking that is something that I feel you can use, Jonathan, because you don't need to know anything about the subscriber for that. I mean, it helps. Like on my list, I know what somebody calls themselves and who their customers are. Like if they're a course creator, they use customers. If they're a freelancer, they use they have clients. And so I do the hyper personalization side of things, but you don't need to do that, right? And this is something that's simple enough that you could kind of set it and forget it. Like you set it up once. All right, now I just use this trigger link. If this button or this link or whatever clicks over to the sales page, it just let me apply this tag or change the custom field or whatever the platform calls for, and do it that way. And it is a simple set it and forget it kind of thing. I have a client that has, he's got a massive list, and he has been using this kind of campaign for quite some time, and he's made over $500,000 in 2 years just from that list. Nice. And he's now not doing any sort of launches. He's just like, okay, that's good. Like, I don't need to stress myself out over those quarterly launches anymore to bring people in. It's just on Evergreen. So
you just said the magic words for me, because I can't stand doing launches.
Yeah, me neither.
So so now you really just flipped a bit in my brain. So we're gonna go deep. I told you, dear listeners, to get deep geek. So I know you know Drip and ConvertKit inside out. I only know Drip, so if we could talk about it in Drip terms, that would be cool. But the principle applies. They both platforms are roughly comparable. So you said 3 clicks on a particular link in a certain amount of time. I didn't even know you could do that in Drip. Like, it's not with tags. It must be. Well,
you have to create in Drip, it's a workflow. So you have to create a workflow that tracks that click. So basically it's applying the tag that triggers the workflow that then updates a custom field for a counter, and then remove the tag and be on their way. Right. So now every time they get that tag, every time they click that link, it counts them. Now, I've found with some audiences, like you might want to throttle that count a little bit. Like some people like click the link a few times, or they click on it in their phone and then within 5 minutes they go to their desktop to click the link. So there's that level, like you have to kind of pay attention when you set it up just to understand what your audience's behavior is. But in the basic sense, it's just a simple workflow that when a tag is applied to then count a custom field and then remove the tag so that the tag can be reapplied later.
Okay. And presumably in there's an if custom field is greater than 3 or just became 3, then move them off the main list and put them on a side list that's like, we can talk about what the side list is in a second, but do you have an if in there?
Exactly right. So once the count at the bottom, if they reach 3, then pass them off into the sequence or another automation or whatever you want to do. If not, just let them be on their way. There's another automation that kind of sits in the side that once that custom field gets updated, you start a timer. Okay. So that timer is there to kind of say, like you and I, we write dailies. I have mine set to 14 days. Because sometimes I do get people binging on, like they'll save up my emails at the end of the week and then just binge. And so what I do is I for 14 days, as soon as that custom field gets updated to 1, that triggers off that other workflow and puts them in for 14 days. Just puts them into a delay for 14 days.
That's it. It's just like wait 14 days and then do something.
Yeah. And it's basically the goals of that workflow are the purchase, or if the time expires and they haven't purchased, then we reset that custom field to 0 and exit out.
And that it happens on. Okay, that was confusing. So, I understand. Like, I get this the timer side workflow. If your e-commerce platform tags them as they bought this thing that the sales page is for, they've reached the goal and it yanks them out of the pause.
Right.
But when do you move them over there when it flips over to 1?
So, right. The trigger is based on 1, right? Because you have the one workflow that is triggered off of the link trigger, right? So that updates the custom field to 1, which then triggers off the second automation, which is just a timer that then drops them into a 14-day delay.
What happens if they don't buy? What happens at the end of the 14 delay?
You reset the custom field back to 0.
Got it. Okay. So it's like, they went for 2. They clicked. They weren't really that interested. They didn't click again. Right. So it's just a way to reset it to 0 if they don't buy.
Exactly right.
Cool. That's so smart. Okay, and it's actually easier than it sounded. That's
really,
really short workflow.
Yeah, and and you can complicate it as much as you want. If you have multiple products and things of that nature, like if you have a membership product versus a $9 thing, maybe you don't want the $9 thing going out when the membership, so you can blow it up as much as you want, but that's the basic foundation of it.
Okay, and so then how does if in the 14 days they click 2 more times, then they are going to they click 2 more times, but they still haven't bought. So there must be a what do you do when someone does buy in that counter workflow? If somebody buys, what do you do?
In the counter, if somebody buys, that's a goal. So pull them out.
Okay, but do you reset to 0? Do you make sure they never go into this workflow again?
So the way that I set up my email marketing is every workflow is a singular function. So if I'm promoting, let's just say a membership, when that trigger hits 3, the number 3, I put them into a salesperson pitch for the membership, which is another workflow.
Yep.
At the top of that workflow, I check to see if they bought. If they're already a part of this, then I exit them out.
Got it.
So that this way I don't have any funky logic or things to keep track of in other automations based on a product status.
Yeah, it does get confusing though, doesn't it? Do you use some sort of naming convention for your workflows? Because
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, because let's talk about that, because I get, from a developer standpoint, it's do one thing well so that you can minimize, everything's like a function. And they can sort of stand alone. It has always been my like one of the things about the drip UI is like I'll look at a workflow and I'll have no idea if it's active. Like it's turned on, but I don't have any idea if anybody's triggered it recently or
Yeah, you have to go into it.
is anybody, do I have a page on my site that I don't know about that's pushing people in here? Because you don't know, because the triggers are set elsewhere. So, like you might have a form where it's like, if somebody submits this, then add them to this workflow. But the workflow doesn't tell you that when someone's been added to it or any idea to know that if it's been used lately.
Well, it does. They've actually improved that, where you could kind of go into this analytics screen of a workflow, and it'll tell you kind of how many people have received emails if there's emails in the workflow. But like what we're talking about with the timer and the counter, you kind of have to dive into the workflow and actually go into like each node to see if this is actually working because there's no emails. So like that analytics dashboard would be just blank.
Oh, yeah. So okay, here's another way to. So this is a real developer-y question. Is each of the workflows listening for an event, or are they or event or are subscribers being pushed to them? Do you know what I mean? Or are they sitting there waiting for people to like an event to happen, or is it explicitly like send jsmith at google.com over there?
Yeah. So basically everything is triggered. I shouldn't say triggered. Everything happens off of that tag being applied when they click the link.
Okay.
Right. So if they click that link, then the first workflow that is the counter workflow is actually sitting there with that trigger in mind. When that tag gets applied, let's do everything else. So the timer workflow is kind of waiting for something to happen, right? Whereas we're actually using the links in the email to push people into that counter workflow.
Yeah, and that's how all of my workflows currently work. Like you go to the top and like no one's been added to it. There's no segment added to it. It's like if tag apply, if this specific tag was applied, then suck this person in. But are you listening you probably said this, but I missed it. In the timer workflow, are you listening for counters to go to 1, or is there no way to do that and you have to, like, can you like at the top, can you say that the trigger event or the event is like if custom field equals 1, you can. Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, the other way around it, because in ConvertKit, you can't do that. Well, actually, I think they just changed it. But like the other way that I've done it in the past is just in the counter workflow, I just apply a tag that triggers off the timer. That's all.
Right. Fair enough. But only the first time.
Right.
Okay. So you said
the tag itself can't be reapplied. So even if somebody comes in the second time, they're already in the timer workflow.
Oh, you don't remove it. Remove it.
I don't remove any tags until they're completely done with everything.
Okay. All right. I love that because there's sort of like when I used to do FileMaker, there was a real problem when you would write these scripts. They were like macros. There was no way to know what was calling it. Like, so if you you could never delete a script because you didn't know what was calling it. And so the parallel here is you could never delete a workflow because you don't know what might be calling it. But as long as you know that you only pull people in based on events, then, well, I suppose you still don't know if you could delete it, but
or it's all based on naming convention.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Right. So how do you, like these two in particular, let's talk about those. So you send out an email, it's got a trigger link in it to a particular sales page or a landing page. They click it and a tag is applied and so that they hit that counter workflow. How do you name these to keep them straight? Yeah,
so the workflows themselves I name everything very similar. Basically, the only thing that's going to change is the product that it applies to.
Okay.
So I would name it salesperson -counter or -timer or -pitch. Right. So now you've got 3 workflows that are all contained with that specific automation flow, if you will. Right.
So what does salesperson represent?
So salesperson, that's the moniker that I gave of this kind of campaign, because it's a salesperson campaign. For me, it's just like a salesperson. The sequence themselves, the emails, is basically that kind of salesperson that's going to come up to you and want to know what room in the house you're putting this TV in.
Okay.
Or, do you have
Okay.
an apartment or a media room, right? And so it's tailored more towards that and open the line of communications, right? It's not this quintessential FAQ, here, I know you have this pain. Here's the solution. Like, here's what other people say. It's not that quintessential sales sequence. That's why I call it a salesperson campaign, because it acts differently, right? It's based on the behavior of that individual being and having seen your product and your sales page.
Okay. Well, then the product name must figure into the workflow.
Right. So the naming convention that I would do would be salesperson hyphen timer hyphen membership, or hyphen product A, right? Or product B, or whatever the case is. And so now, if I know, hey, product B sucks and I don't need it, and like nobody buys this thing anyway, I could just remove all three of those workflows because they're all related to product B.
Got it. And so essentially for each landing page, you've got those three workflows.
Yes.
In this model.
And one tag really that triggers off all three, right? Because
Which they click the link, yeah.
Right. And so that link would basically, that tag would also have a naming convention to it, which then is basically clicked hyphen salesperson hyphen membership or product or whatever.
Okay.
So now I've got, I use a naming convention that basically is action, which is always a verb, hyphen, then context, so that's a noun, hyphen meta information.
Okay. Got it. All right. So then so the path is I've gotten to 3 clicks in the counter workflow within 14 days. And what is the action that sends them to the sequence?
That's in the counter if the number reaches 3.
And then you tag them with something that sucks them into.
Yep.
Okay. And removes them from the daily list or no?
Yes. Yeah. My daily list is usually, or I basically have a segment that excludes people that are being pitched.
I see. So you'd say, like, if the person is in this or this or this or this,
well,
don't.
That always gets messy.
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, I missed one or something, right?
Yeah, I made a new one and forgot to add it to this other place.
What I do in the pitch sequences, as well as a welcome sequence too, because that's an important sequence, is I have a custom field called being_pitch. Mm-hmm. And I set that to true. So anytime I'm pitching somebody, that is one of the first fields after the check of whether or not they have the product. Mm-hmm. I set that custom field to true. So that this way my dailies are respecting that custom field. So if, as long as they don't have being pitched equals to true, send them this email. Mm-hmm. Then that covers all bases if I forget, because I don't, one of the things that I got stuck on early on was like just building a recipient list was like a 9-minute process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't know. All right. Well, yeah, these people shouldn't get this. Maybe they should. And like, I was like, this is annoying, right?
Yes.
Like,
it's a nightmare.
So
I just want to press send.
Right.
And have it go to the right people.
And so that's why I was like, okay, keep it simple. My dailies go to everybody unless they're getting pitched or in the welcome sequence. And so being pitched can become hairy, like, because if I've got multiple products and I forget the product, well, all right, fine. In my workflow automation, that handles that because I just set that custom field right away.
And do you check for that custom field? Like, I don't know if this would be possible, but if, and this might be what you're saying, but like if they are, do you also check for being pitched in the other workflows?
So,
like, let's say I clicked
right,
2 different links 3 times each.
Correct. Right. So I do in a matter of speaking based on priority. So that kind of gets a little hairy, right?
Yeah.
Because there are some, with any business, there are products that you want people to buy, and there are products that you're trying to get people to buy so that they buy the bigger product.
Right. Like a ladder.
Right. And so if they happen to trigger the flagship product, let's call it, then yeah, I basically ignore all the rest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they're thinking about the big kahuna. You're going to make sure that gets priority. So
Yes.
like, and just so it's obvious to the dear listener, the thing we're worried about, both of us, is you don't want to send them like 3 emails in one day.
And selling 3 different products.
Yeah. Yeah. And your daily, right? So
Right.
it's like unsubscribe.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like too over the top. It's not helpful. Like the goal of this is to be helpful. So, all right. All right. So then does anything happen now? Oh, so let's talk about the sales sequence. So you said it's not a generic FAQ type of thing. How long is, once they get into the sales sequence, like what is the nature of the emails? How many are they? How frequently do you send them? And what happens at the end if they don't buy, or even if they do buy?
Yeah. It sort of depends for me. It depends on the product itself, right? If it's a $50 product or a $100 product, I usually just send 2 or 3 emails. There's no reason to kind of, beat them over the head. But if it's a membership or something else, then it's 6 emails over the course of the entire week. And I send, because my list is a custom daily, and even when it's, on a list of a client that sends weekly, it's a daily sequence, right? It goes over the course of that time. I've tested this in the past to kind of be like, okay, well, it's a sales sequence, but we don't want it to come off as a sales sequence and that kind of thing. But when if it's a weekly email, when you start to spread that out, it's not as effective. And then people just like, all right, they just keep talking about the same thing and there's no reason. Ironically, though, what I've found that has worked super well over the past year is in the very first email, calling it out, right? Like saying, hey, I know that you've checked this out. My system tells me that you checked this out. I want to help you out. I want to make sure that all of your questions are answered, right?
Yeah.
And really just laying it out on the table so that now it doesn't seem creepy, right? Like, and I got that idea from, ironically, an Amazon Alexa show, because my wife and I were talking about salmon or whatever. And then all of a sudden, random salmon recipes were appearing on the display.
Yeah,
Like,
sure, they're not listening. I've had the
Right.
same experience.
and so I was like, well, that's creepy, right? Like, all right, and I know that it has to listen because it's waiting for that wake word. But I was like, oh, I wonder if you just do this in email. Like, will that work? Like, I mean, people know that it's automated, and people always tell me anyway that like I can't do anything genuine. People are like, how'd you automate that? I'm like, no, that was my fingers, doing the thing, right? Like, so.
Right. Everyone thinks it's a robot.
I mean, I make custom personalized videos calling their name and business, and people are like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
I
Like,
turned on my camera and did
yeah.
it. Right.
So
That doesn't scale.
So I was just, I was like, I'm going to test this for a little while. And it actually converted better. Like that email itself converted more people than not calling it out. So it was kind of like an interesting kind of little test that I ran on my own business. And then I found the same thing with clients as well, that were willing to kind of like inject a little personality into the emails there. So, so that's it really. It's just the sequence itself is really meant for helping, right? And so the first email is kind of setting the tone, kind of just like looking at them to, kind of say like, hey, I see you, right? Like, and then the next email is going into, if you don't know anything about the individual, but if you do, it becomes even more powerful if you can make it hyper specific to who they are,
Right.
and sharing a story of a customer that looks like them. Otherwise, you kind of know what the benefits of the product is and share a story in that second email.
Right.
And then the third email is simple. It's, hey, hit reply. What, how can I help? Right. I don't want to belabor the point here, but, S or get off the pot, right? Kind of thing, right? Like you're here, you're not unsubscribed at this point. And I know you've checked this, and now we've had 6 or 7 emails talking about this, that you've taken a look at the website as well. So there's 10 touch points. You still haven't bought. Let me know what's going on here.
Yeah, what's holding you up?
And then the final 2 emails is another story usually. And then, the last email is like, I'm getting off this gravy train kind of thing. Like it's instead of creating a sense of urgency, like there's an expiry, which you can do. And I've done that with some clients. Some clients are like, let's give them a 10% off or something, you know? So you could do that, but I'm more of the mindset of like, I'm not going to belabor this point anymore. I'm here if you want to talk, you know, that's it. And here's a little, you know, like depending on the product, I will sometimes give like a template or a worksheet or something out of that, something just to kind of, something that gives them a taste of what's behind the scenes. In other cases, like memberships, I've actually given them like a 6-minute Loom video of what it does look like behind the scenes in that last email. And those have worked pretty well too.
So what happens when they're in the middle of the salesperson sequence and they reply and you start a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I don't overcomplicate things. They're going to get the next email, right? Like, if I start the conversation with them, then, you know, obviously the human factor comes into play and they know that they're talking to me, but they also know because at the top I told them that they were in a sequence. Right. So I don't try to overcomplicate it. The only thing that kind of gets hairy is like I have these things built in for my services, right? So that becomes a little bit hairy. I will actually remove people out of that because
manually.
Yeah, because as with services and stuff like that, it's a longer sales cycle. It's not just, you know, random Tuesday you're gonna buy.
Yeah, they're gonna right. They're gonna they're gonna click a link and be like, oh, here's 25 grand.
Right.
So okay, so super interesting. And like, I know, dear listener, I know we're getting into like small details, but really this is not that complicated. You know, like coming from someone, if you know, a grain of salt, like I'm a developer too. So, you know, the logic of it is not that complex. Like you could draw this on a flowchart on a piece of paper very easily.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you think like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you imagine a highway, really, right? It's just your highway is your main newsletter, your email, your dailies, whatever the case is. And the off ramps are when somebody actually triggers off that link. And then like here in New York, a lot of places on the East Coast, it's like a clover leaf, all the exits, right? So you got off the ramp, you went down the side roads a little bit, and then you got right back on, right? Because you either bought or you didn't buy, and you get back onto the same highway again. So it is very simple, and it's super effective. Like it just doesn't like a phrase that I love is one by Leonardo da Vinci, and it's simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And the thing that I found with email marketing that, you know, you and I both ran into, as well as, you know, plethora of other people, is that you do get into the shiny object. Like, oh, I could do this, I could do that, I could track this, I could track that. And it's mostly useless. Like you're not going to go back. You think you're going to go back and look at it, but it's just like, now I'm just confused. And then I'm not going to log into this thing because
it's overwhelming.
Yeah. And so when you think of it like, hey, if I get people on my email list, that is really just has these salesperson campaigns set up for each of the products that I want to sell. All I have to concentrate is getting people on the email list.
Yeah, you can forget about everything else, right? And it's like you've got an automated salesperson for each thing, right? With a way to escalate to the manager by just hitting reply on any message.
Exactly.
How much time do you spend encouraging on the sales sequences, encouraging replies, or
twice?
Do you just okay?
And there's 2 emails that specifically do that, the first and the third. But people reply anytime. Like, you know, they get it. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that they open the line of communication. Like they know that line is open. And so, because the thing that I looked at, like I said, is if you get your third email in that, we've hit you now 10 times with this offer. Like you're familiar with it. Like I can't really say much more. Like unless you give me some specific question or thought or feedback or something like that. And that is super helpful for me because then I can just turn that back around on the sales page.
Totally. Right. So, and you do ask, you're like, you get to that off the pot email and it's like, hey, just, if you hit reply, I'd love to know how do you phrase it? Like what the objection is or what the holdup is or,
Yeah,
what's on your
I
mind.
just say, I know that we haven't, convinced you to purchase yet. What's holding you back?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I find that email, the more human you make it and the shorter it is, the more effective it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've already seen a lot of, and I don't want to say
Long.
fluff is the wrong, but they've seen a lot of copy already,
Yeah.
right? And so they've read the FAQ, they've seen the testimonials, they've, that kind of stuff. So there's not much more to be said other than let me help you. Like that's what I'm here for. Like there is something that is triggering you to be here still. And so
Right.
let me help you. And I'm just trying to reach you to the buying decision, whether it's a no or a yes. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Okay. So there's probably going to be even more of these tactical questions. And I'm sure your answer to this is like, there's nothing you can do about it, but maybe there's something I can do about it. So it's not uncommon. It's not super common, but I would say 10% of the time, someone will subscribe to my email list with an email that is not the one they will use to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And it might even be more than 10%. So I see a fair number of these like, mailing list at customdomain.com. And then when somebody buys, it's like Jeff at customdomain.com.
Right.
So they end up, well, I guess they wouldn't, no, they won't keep clicking though, will they? So that the timer will scrub them out.
Yeah. So this is the bane of my existence. Right?
I know.
But yeah, I mean, they're not going to get pulled out of any sequence, right? And so that's part of this is like when they make the purchase, we pull them out of being pitched and everything else. Mm-hmm. But they won't. They'll still get those emails.
Well, if they probably won't keep clicking the link. Like they might never get to 3 clicks is the
So,
thing.
oh, yeah, on the front end side of things, then it depends on how you handle your customers, right? Mm-hmm. So like me, I put everybody back on the highway, but I know that what they purchased. So what I do then is use Liquid in my emails to kind of filter that link out. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, hey, go check this out, I will actually nudge them to use the product instead.
Okay, so wait.
So when they go back on my dailies,
Yeah.
if I know that they bought some digital product, mm-hmm. when they get that email that talks about the thing that the call to action is to go buy, mm-hmm. I will actually use Liquid Code to check to see if they purchased. Mm-hmm. If they did purchase, instead of saying click here to buy, I will actually, I will click the link. I will give them a link to nudge them to use the product.
That's not penetrating my thick head.
So in other words, like if let's just say that like one of my digital products is, smarter emails using Liquid Code, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, a little bit meta here, but
right, that's fine.
But it's basically a code snippet library, right? Rip and run. You can go ahead and paste it into any email and it'll work, right? As long as your ESP is like drip, ConvertKit and so on.
Yep.
In the email itself, let's just say the email is all about personalization, right? And it talks to, it talks about a story of how, HubSpot did a study that, personalization is, personalized CTAs are 202% more likely to convert than generic CTAs. Click here to buy smarter emails using Liquid. But if I know that you bought smart emails, then I will actually say, go ahead and go look at number 2 mm-hmm. and give them the link to the number 2 snippet. So it actually prompts them to actually use the product instead of buying the product that they already have.
Okay. So maybe a dumb question. That's interesting. And now the reason it didn't make sense to me at first was because my assumption would be that you would, instead of advertising the product they already bought, you'd promote a different one that they haven't bought.
I could. In some cases, I do. A lot of cases, I actually, especially for smaller digital products, because people buy these things on impulse. And so a lot of times people don't use them.
They forget they have them.
Right. Yeah. And so what that does is, I forgot I had that. And then they'll go use it. and then I'll get an email with a testimonial in it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I do these. I handle that a little bit differently. I have like follow-up sequences for people when they bought something.
Yeah,
And
I do that too.
Okay. And I don't, it's like crazy simple. Like they're going to get 2 emails from me that day. So like they buy a thing and they get like 50 emails from like Moonclerk and Stripe and all of, they get a million emails. And then the next day they get a, thanks. If I don't know what, it depends on the product, what the thing might be, but it's the same sort of thing. It's like, for example, Hourly Billing is Nuts is available in every digital format you can think of, including audio. So two kinds of audio. And I'm just out of curiosity, I'm like, what, how do you usually read your ebooks? Is it like, how did you read this? I'm curious, like Android, iOS, Kindle, Audible, like where did you put it? And I get tons of replies to that. And then I think there's a couple of more after that, but I don't pull them off of my daily list. They're real short, like one or two question messages. Yeah. So I don't know.
So I do that follow up. Once they complete the follow up, then they go back on the daily.
Okay. Yeah. I don't separate it out. They're real short and they're like, I'm trying to, it's the same point though. I'm trying to activate them. I'm trying to get them to get the value, get the ROI. It's like you spent $120, read the damn thing, watch the videos. Cause I don't want that like, I never got,
Right.
So yeah, so it's the same kind of thing, but it's maybe mine's definitely a little bit less sophisticated. It's a blunt instrument. But I've never had any complaints. I don't really look at any of the.
Usually people don't complain when they get multiple emails about a purchase. I found that. People will complain if they and it's kind of funny, they opt in to like 3 lead magnets. They're like, I'm getting, they'll say like the next day, like, I'm getting like 4 emails from you.
Right.
I'm just going to unsubscribe. You're like, yeah, because you opted in that many times. Like, I don't know.
I got that enough that I de-emphasized all except for one of my lead magnets because I knew which one was the best. And that happened a lot where they'd sign up for 4 things. So of course you got 4 emails.
Right.
But they don't, it's like, it's like they imagine somehow I guess it's not a crazy thing to imagine that I could somehow know that I already emailed them in the last 24 hours. So that would be a really cool feature in Drip. Like, did I email this person in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, but they're never going to build that in for you.
No.
What I've done, because it was like, I would say about 5 years ago where every lead magnet had like 3 or 4 emails off the back of it. Right. Now I just do one email, deliver the lead magnet, and everybody goes into the same welcome sequence. So when somebody opts in, they're expecting the lead magnet, right? Do I care if you use the lead magnet? Sure. But am I going to nudge you 3 times over the next 3 days? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring you right into the welcome sequence because I know off of the back of the welcome sequence, which is the goal anyway, of that initial sequence is to get you to buy something. So if I could start to craft the proper story arc from the welcome sequence into the sales pitch, then that's the goal. So
yeah, that makes sense. I'm more of a fan of the kind of like email mini course lead magnet than the like here's your PDF.
I've seen a decline in the performance of those though.
Which
over the email series.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that? It doesn't make sense though. I mean, if my goal is to get them on a daily list, sending them 7 emails kind of makes sense.
I think because people don't want to wait; they want a quick win, and I guess it depends on what that sequence is, right? They don't want to have to wait until Sunday to actually get that win. They want the win now, and so I've just my main lead magnet is actually one of those email courses, which I'm now changing to a better lead magnet, which is a PDF download.
Interesting. I get this objection a lot from software developers who are like, well, you could have just given me the link. You didn't need my email address.
Yes, I get that quite often. There are certain audiences like that. Yes.
Yes, there are. The other thing is, and I have one very popular lead magnet, my main one, 6-day free course about value pricing bootcamp, and I have a PDF download of 5-page proposal template. Those are the two that I capped. But I just massively de-emphasized on my website, the template download. So no, I won't do it, but it would be smart, but I won't do it, is to like go back and actually see on a per capita basis which one performs better. I don't even know how I would do that. Like in other words, say like, okay, because it's de-emphasized, the proposal template gets way less traffic. But let's say per person, my customer lifetime value, or like their time staying subscribed before turning off the list, is better for one or the other, or the people that unsubscribe right at the, like the welcome email, like, oh, thanks to see you here, you can unsubscribe if you want, but you're about to go on my daily list, and see what the unsub rate is at that point for the two different lead magnets. That would probably be the place I would look.
Yeah. I mean, what I try to do is with lead magnets, I do 2 fields, custom fields. One is what they came onto the list the very first time, what lead magnet that was.
How do you do that? Like, how do you check to see if it's populated already? And
yeah. So I have a origin campaign custom field, and every lead magnet that they come in triggers off a workflow. If that field is set, don't do anything. If it's not, then put it as that lead magnet.
Got it.
And then I do something similar with a last lead magnet.
Most recent.
Right. So same process or whatever. But basically between those two, it kind of gives me an idea of like, I look at it from the conversions perspective. So if they buy, what lead magnet did they go to last? Because that to me is an indicator of maybe a need that they have that leads to that product. And the origin, the very first lead magnet in a lot of those cases don't matter as much.
Interesting. It's just the one I heard of. So It's like the one that crossed their radar. It's like their first awareness of your stuff.
But I use that first one, like what you mentioned. I check unsubscribes to see, like, okay, this lead magnet actually leads to a lot of unsubscribes within the first 45 days. I don't care for this one anymore.
Right. That makes sense. Right. So this is a super tactical question, but like, what's your process for like checking this stuff? Like, when do you are you obsessively checking these things, or do you do it like on the first of the month or first business day of the month? Like, how do you work that into your routine?
Yeah, I used to. Like anything, it's like when you set it up, it's like your baby. You're like refreshing the screen, right? But I just I will look at it regularly. I would say probably every 3 weeks.
Like by accident? Or...
No, intentionally.
But I don't mean by accident. I mean like you're like, oh, I should really look at this today, or do you have it in your calendar?
No, it's in the calendar.
Okay.
It's definitely more frequent than once a month now because the list is growing, right? So that's also something to consider. But if I get like a wave of if all of a sudden I start getting sales notifications in Slack or something like that, then I'll be like, what was mentioned somewhere, right? Or, I will take a look at it intentionally if I see unusual activities, because I get notice in Slack for sales. If I get a certain number of when they start hitting that threshold in some cases, like services, I actually want to know like if they're approaching it, because then I'll actually, in some cases with the services side of things, take a look at what they're doing. I'll take a look at that subscriber. It actually pings my CRM as people start to approach that threshold. And so if I start to...
What are they doing that's causing them to approach the threshold?
The salesperson sequence. So if they get to let's just say for the sake of argument, they get to two instead of 3. 3 is the trigger. But if they get to 2, it'll actually... I've created a Zapier automation to kind of drop that person into my CRM.
And what CRM do you use?
I use Pipedrive.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. All right, so... and the reason there is because of capacity planning or?
Yeah, and also to see if if somebody is a hotter lead and they don't check their email as much.
You might just go manually, like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
imagine that.
Yeah. And that's usually when I'm like, well, how'd you do that? I get a reply like that. So
Okay, cool. So like, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. That feels very, very
yes.
specific. So let's. I've got a couple of questions written down here. Maybe we could kind of talk about. I'd like to talk about the bigger picture animation stuff, like the animation, the bigger automation stuff that you're doing. If you want to talk about that, even though that's definitely like super edge case for people listening. But I think if anybody listened this far, they might be interested in the kind of like 2 year long campaign concept and how much you can set it, forget it. If you want to talk about that, that'd be pretty cool. And then I've got some like lightning round questions that, just for an expert like you, it'd be interesting to get your take on this like black magic stuff of email deliverability and stuff. Cool. Okay. So don't think we talked about it on the other show. I think we talked about it after the show, but you've got this sort of like big picture plan to take. I mean, how long have you been doing
since October 2020?
Okay, so coming up on 2 years, if I know what year it is, yes. Okay, so coming up on 2 years. So you're talking about what is it, 600 emails maybe?
Yeah,
something like that.
Well, so 600 times 2 because I got 2 lists.
Oh, 2 lists. Oh my god. And and if anybody wants to know about Jason's process for that, stay tuned for Doing Daily, different podcasts that we're doing. Anyway, so what's the plan? So at a certain point, you're like, I'm just repeating myself. Like, this is mostly all evergreen. I'm adding nothing new to my own thought leadership. I'm not drilling into any new rabbit holes here. This is basic stuff localized for a particular audience. And I'm maybe getting bored, maybe just feeling repetitive, not growing intellectually, whatever the motivations are. That'd be interesting to know. And then what do you do? Do you just turn, Ouroboros, just like if you get to the end, you go back to the beginning? Snake eating its tail.
So the sense was just that. Like, I speak about evergreen things, and they're just understanding the subscribers' awareness of their own email marketing. There would be times where somebody would jump on my list and I'd be having a quote unquote conversation like this, right, through a number of days in email. And they'd be like, I'm just looking to grow my list. Do you have any resource around that? And so I suck at blogging. I don't blog. It's just one of those things. And yet I have written tons of emails about that. And so for me, I was like, okay, banger emails, like what are the best of kind of things on the pillar topics that I talk about, and let's put that into an evergreen newsletter, right, which goes out 6 times a week. I've left space on Wednesdays and Saturdays and other days to be timely, right? So if there's something that happens in the news or something, that like this podcast that I go on, at least I can talk about it when it releases and things of that nature. And so I've left space, but 80% of the emails that are going out were already successful, and I could even improve them, right? Because I know what worked. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this other email wasn't as successful, but it definitely emphasizes the point. And if I lean it towards maybe improve the subject line or whatever the case may be, I can make it so much better. So what I've done was get back 20 minutes a day from writing those emails by putting them into Evergreen. And that 20 minutes is now used to put people onto the list. So refocus my efforts on other things for the business that actually drives people into that list.
Yeah, it's funny, after we talked last time, and you mentioned this, I think it was that night. I usually write my emails at night, where someone asked a question about the previous day's email, And I'm like, I know I've answered this before. So I Googled my own email, my site, found exactly what I remembered, and then tweaked it to like it was good, but like the tone was off. Like it was a ranty kind of email, and this person had like a real reasonable question, and so I kind of like wrote a V2 of an old message from like 2017, 5-year-old message, and I was like, that was actually pretty great. It was like I wouldn't have said it any better if I did it off the top of my head, and having like the starting point, like, oh yeah, these are all good points. Like it's like someone else wrote it, and I just sort of, but I feel no plagiarism. Kind of like if it was someone else's, I would feel
Right.
very plagiaristic. Like it was similar enough that it would have been plagiarism, but since it was mine, I was like, oh, this was clear. Like it was good. The tone's off. So I fixed the tone and I shortened it. I deleted some stuff because it was a little bit of a ranty email. It got kind of sloppy. But yeah, and I imagine like it's an interesting way, if editing equals thinking,
Right.
it's like, right. So it's like if I go back and look at something, because I had, again, it's like super evergreen stuff. It wasn't about like what was happening in politics that day. So revise it and make it closer and closer to diamond hard, do that for a year, and it's like, geez, if I tag these things, which I don't, other than just regular keyword searching, it's like they're not tagged. But if you tagged them and put them into groups, it would be a very interesting thing to do, where you could kind of choose your own adventure. I'm super interested in advisory retainers, and they click a link and they get literally 30 emails about the, not a sequence really, like not a today we're going to learn about this and tomorrow we're going to learn about that, but like topical, almost like a book delivered over email, a short book delivered over email about this particular subject, which I was like, geez, that totally was like, yeah, you definitely triggered that
And
kind of thought.
to be honest, that's kind of where I see my evergreen going. So, because I ask off of the back of an opt-in what their goal with email marketing is. And knowing that, I could kind of carve that path for them. If you're looking for list growth, yeah, you're looking for list growth ultimately to make sales, but sales is a little bit down the road, maybe, right? And so, yeah, for me, I'm trying to get to an evergreen newsletter of 1 year, then take stock.
On all
Yes,
different topics.
on my pillar
I
topics.
mean,
Yes.
your pillar topics,
And
right?
once I do that, then take a look at that and then then basically write an email to the list saying, hey, what is your goal with email marketing? And basically let them plinkle themselves down into the sequence that they go into, just reshuffling the emails that I've already written.
Yeah. So just for the person listening, the thing that I fear about this is that I actually enjoy, it's almost meditative for me, the daily writing practice. So if I was going, for me, I'm not actually planning on doing this anytime soon. But a thing that has occurred to me to do is I've got my system set up in a very unusual way that I wouldn't recommend, but that a developer might do, so that I could mark a bunch of evergreen emails that I've already sent, and any day that whatever, it doesn't happen that often, but I've missed a day here and there. Any day that I haven't sent an email by midnight, it sends a best of email, where it's like where I'm racing against my own robot to write something. So then it's a little bit more, because people get my emails like any time of night. It could be 3 a.m.
I think I get yours at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something.
I mean, I'm not usually up that late, but I like to write them after the kids are asleep. So that's my, which could be midnight. Once everybody's in bed, the dogs are away, and it's like, okay, now I can like really enjoy this, and because I love doing it, I really do. And but occasionally it's like, oh, there's family in
Right.
town,
Yep.
or something, and you're just like, you gotta like sneak away and dash off an email in 5 minutes, which I can do, and I don't mind. But that's
Right.
not my favorite. I would almost rather know that I've got this robot that's going to pick a best of from 2018 and send that instead. So that's kind of like my, if I get hit by a bus, the mailing list doesn't die type
Yeah,
of
it's
thing,
kind of
right?
creepy actually, though. But
A little bit. Yeah. There's a book called Damon that kind of gave me the idea, sci-fi book, by
yeah,
the
I
way.
mean, for me, the fear was two actually. One, does somebody recognize an email? And two,
Just someone
right.
to
So, like, in
recognize
other
it.
words, when I, like, if I repeated an email that they already got, like, if they've been on my list for a little while, what I did
Oh,
was I basically took the bucket and dumped everybody in the top again. So
right.
that was one. And the second one was, how do I address the timely stuff or pitching things during
Right.
which, like if I said, September 1st rolls around, I want to run a sale just because, for whatever reason.
Yep. See, I know how I would do this.
Yeah.
How
So
would you do it? You do it with the Wednesdays and
that
Saturdays.
goes for the timely stuff. The other bit of it is a content snippet.
Yep.
So
Me too.
it was just thinking about that because ultimately, really what I wanted to do was I wanted to get my time back because I had already built the practice. I like writing. I like writing the thing, but I was just like, I actually wanted to make the experience better for the individuals. Right. And
Right.
so with the end goal in mind of, at some point in time where it's this choose your own adventure style kind of thing, which I did with a podcast, and it worked pretty well.
What?
Yeah. So,
How the heck did
I
you
mean, it
do
was
that?
the email list for that podcast. Right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they
Okay.
would opt in
Wild.
and then they get a series of emails that were related to the topic that they selected, but it was links to those podcasts.
Oh man, that is so interesting. But was that a nightmare
It was
or was it
cool,
cool?
and people loved it because like they got the answers that they were looking for, and so I was like, I've always kept that in the back of my mind of like, if I could just do that for email, like not necessarily a podcast, but same idea, topical groups, like you were saying, like a book, and
Yeah.
deliver that. Maybe that's the best approach, and so that's where my ultimate goal is to get to. Obviously, ton of content, right? And so I have the content
Yeah.
already. Now I just kind of got to tweak it a little bit, and but once the thing is built,
Yeah. You need a
yeah, and
librarian.
that's what it is. I mean, I guess right now I'm building the evergreen ahead of the cars, right, on the road. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a nice buffer, but at the same time, it's like, okay, there's this evaluation that I'm always doing. And I do it like every other week now to get like a bunch of emails loaded into the evergreen, where I'm like, okay, I remember okay, so like really getting the pillar topics in the evergreen to see how that works. And what's interesting is like I look at it, opens and clicks, like the same people got that same email and better results, like better metrics, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's interesting. Like, okay.
Yeah, I've talked to one person who has already done this. I only know one person who's done this, and I was on his list, daily list, and he had a really unusual message one day. He just told this really, really visual, unusual story from his life. And I replied, and I was like, I am positive I read this before. Did I read it on your blog or something? And he laughed, and he was like, no, I just dumped everybody back into the beginning of the sequence, and you're the first person to notice it,
Right.
or at least reply and say
Yeah.
that they noticed it. But it was a notable email. It wasn't like, it was like really easy to be like, oh, I've definitely heard this
Right.
story. It was a story. So it was like, I definitely
And
read
what's
this
funny
before.
is like, see, I did something really more direct. I linked to a tweet that obviously had a date on it, and I said, hey, they replied to me yesterday. Well, that date was months ago. So it was like, I had somebody reply back to me saying, maybe you sent this out before or something, like, so. But for me, the stories tell a lot, and I'm pretty active on Twitter anyway, and people might find that it is familiar. Maybe they did get that email twice. But I share stories on Twitter a lot and things of like podcasts and things of that nature. So I'm not overly concerned with, and I don't share like something like what you mentioned, like yeah, that's stuck in my mind,
story.
but yeah, for me, it's more, I was just worried that initially that people were going to notice. And that was like, I just did a test. I was like, all right, I'm going to take 30 days. I'm going to dump email people into a 30-day sequence of past emails and see what happens. And nobody said anything. In fact, people replied to the same email that they replied to the first time, which was funny. So for me, that was like, all right, this is validating something, but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I was going to say, probably 50% or more people didn't read it the first time anyway. And then, but now you're saying like even the ones that did, they had the same reaction.
Which is funny because I haven't checked in a while, but initially when I put everybody through, I started like, okay, if they had already subscribed at this date, then let me see if they opened it beforehand. And I kind of did like a little thing, and it was like a 50-50 shot. Let's be honest. I mean, everybody's busy, and if I'm sending daily emails anyway, people aren't going to remember what I sent to them three weeks ago. So
yeah, never mind 3 years ago. All right, so let's. I know we got to wrap up, so let's talk about. I got a couple of lightning rounds, and this might be a rabbit hole, so we'll just try and we don't need to go into like a giant soapbox. We can point people with links to, because I know you've written about this. But the first one, maybe this will be a short question. I've gotten hit with form spam a couple times because I had single opt-in. We're going to talk about double opt-in next. So I had all my forms were single opt-in for years, and a couple times I got some kind of form spam. Do you know why anyone would bother doing that? Why does someone do that? But there's nothing. No, there's nothing in it. They just subscribe. No. They're not sending me an email.
What they're trying to figure out is how they can use your brand in phishing attacks elsewhere.
So they're looking for the reply.
They're looking to see, one, if your server is exposed, and maybe they can use that in their network of spam kind of things, right? So they're going to get headers back when you reply, or auto respond back or whatever. So they could see headers and IP addresses and things of that nature. But two, to see like if Jonathan Stark, your brand, your domain, your email address, and all that kind of thing, they can use and send emails on your behalf.
So they're
like
looking for
authentication, all that stuff.
Okay. Oh, okay. But why would they send 5,000? They could just do it.
I don't know. It's a script kiddie. I mean, I guess basically they're trying and this is the only thing that I can equate it to, because I don't, again, that's like the other side of the coin on email, and I've never ventured down that road. But when you use a tool like Glock Apps, and this is a tool that helps you with deliverability. It scans your email, it scans your list. It basically tells you, if your email is going to get delivered in the inbox or promotion or blocked by spam assassin or whatever. But you get an email list back, a seed list that you put into your ESP, and you send an email to that seed list, and Glock Apps spits back a report.
And they're all their email addresses
that they control. And what each email address is tied to is it like an individual client. So like Outlook is for this, and Yahoo is for this, and Gmail's for that, custom domain there, and so on and so forth. So kind of see how your thing just lands in the inbox on those various different clients. So my thought is when somebody's doing that, they're trying to see the same sort of thing. Like if they send 50 emails into your list, they're also monitoring clients from a scripting level on their end to see, oh, okay, Jonathan's landing in the inbox in every client. We got to use that,
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
And that's a gut feel. I don't know if that's why, but that's my assumption on that.
I got a new one recently where they subscribe and then they reply. Like they have a bot that's replying, which is bizarre.
I've had that, but it's like they don't reply anything. It's just they reply.
They reply nothing, or it says forward this to Rebecca at, and then nothing. There's no link. There's nothing for me to click. It's not some kind of phishing thing. It's bizarre, and it must be reasonably difficult to code. So it's like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But anyway, okay. So that leads me to my next question, which is single opt-in or double opt-in?
Yeah,
your thoughts?
This is another episode, but I'll try to keep it concise.
Yeah, we can link to your thoughts on
Yeah.
that as
So,
well.
and I've got a Twitter thread that goes pretty deep into this, but basically what it is the, I look at double opt-in always, but with a twist, not the default crappy double opt-in that every ESP gives you as a checkbox. I look
Yeah.
at things like that are custom built, like what the Morning Brew did, or the Hustle, or Quartz, or any of these news outlets, these publishers that base
Yeah.
their engagement on that opt-in. So they hold real true to, I mean, the Morning Brew, I think it's 18 days. If you opt in and in 18 days you haven't clicked on something, you're gone. And so I've modeled that and I've built that model into my own list as well as my clients list on certain platforms because you can do it there. So for me, all the forms are single opt-in, but there's a double opt-in behind that doesn't give that, hey, go click an email, confirm your
Yeah.
email.
I hate those
Yes.
as a subscriber, and they're a nightmare as a
Yes.
publisher because they go to spam so much, and or people forget or whatever, and it's like they had the impulse, like give them the email they asked for. They asked for the email, give it to them, but when you get 8,000 opt-ins or 10,000 opt-ins in 2 days,
Yes.
something's wrong, and you're paying for that, and it's garbage. And even if you run it through a validator, they might be valid, but they're still
and
bots.
What I would do in that case, though, is I would add, at least if that's not the norm, right? Then I would add a reCAPTCHA to it or something of that nature. I wouldn't go re-architect the back end to go double opt-in. But yeah, that's a pain in the neck. I get it. But I look at it like, the Morning Brew has 4 million email addresses or something like that. I mean, who knows what the actual number is, but it's in the millions, and they're getting their whole model, their business model is based off of referrals. So if they can do it right, we all have ESPs that give us the metrics to actually measure that stuff. Why can't we do it?
Yeah. So I turned on double opt-in for all my forms, but I knew it was gonna be temporary. And I love this idea of like, look, if you haven't clicked something in 18 emails, then you're probably not gonna. You're either a bot or something. And yeah, I guess there's some like link followers in corporate that kind of like make clicks look real or something. I suppose it could be gamed, but I'd rather play that game and go back to the single opt-in. reCAPTCHA makes me want to vomit. I'd rather have robots on my list and pay for them.
And I get why, like the study that I did was basically to understand how double opt-in versus single opt-in affects the number of subscribers on your list. And I studied 6 months worth of data across 115 forms. And it was about 34% of those that opted to double opt-in got stuck in that purgatory. Like they were just, they didn't.
Yeah. And then you can't email.
Yeah, you're locked out. And like Drip has one retry, and other platforms have one retry. ConvertKit has none. If they miss that email, they're done. And I was like, this is. I mean, you either paid if you're doing paid ads, or you're spending a ton of time on content organically to drive these emails, and a third of them are lost. And so for me,
valid emails.
and
lost,
when I did the study and I reversed on these 115 to the single opt-in with the time-based engagement, it went anywhere between 2 and 10%. Basically, dropped to 2 or 10% of those emails that opted in were bogus. And so you just have a pruning process that goes off the back of that, either through that time-based thing, if they're, somebody fat-fingered their email address or whatever, and it just bounces all the time. And that's the other thing too. Most of these ESPs, they bounce. If it's a bounce, they unsubscribe them anyway. So I don't,
Yeah, I'm not worried about those.
Right.
Those are not a problem.
Right.
It's the ones that it's differentiating a real person from a bot. That's the problem.
I mean, I've heard and I've seen Klaviyo now can tell you as the business owner whether somebody's reading it on an iOS device or not. Which that's kind of, I mean, that's been the biggest wave landing on email marketers' desk in the past year was their iOS update because of the privacy protection. Now, if I could tell that they're using privacy protection, then I can lump them into a segment that way. And what I've gotten from other ESPs in the past, until I found that Klaviyo thing, that was impossible to do, to detect that. I'm like, well, now Klaviyo does it, so they're doing it. There's a way, right? So yeah. I mean, double opt-in for me. And the goal goes back to that same idea of the experience with the subscriber. Like just to do that handshake dance kind of thing, it's just annoying. And like, there's got to be a better way. We want to innovate that. So
right, cool. Well, this has been amazing. We could probably go for another hour, but tell people where they can go find out more. Where's the best place to go?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Res with 3 Z's on Twitter. My DMs are open there. Or you can go to nurturekit.co and you can find out all about email marketing.
Killer. Go do it. If you're sending email, go check it out. If you're not sending email, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Like I said at the top, that was my first regret.
Yeah. I've heard it from so many people. Why didn't I start this earlier?
Yep.
All right, gang. That is it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly.